My name's Aaron. I am going to be running this presentation. Today's presentation is all about being efficient in using Fusion 360. And when I say that, I'm referring to some of the tools you have to leverage things like symmetry, to leverage patterns, to leverage all these things, and to show you different tools that you have in the different workspaces to help you in this approach. Real quick about me, I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to the University of Nevada, Reno. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm all over Twitter. Connect with me. I love to hear from you guys and hear what you're working on and help you out where I can. So I am also very super efficient. Very super efficient. That's a great way to describe myself. uh, to the point where it's annoying to my wife, and she probably prefers to be more casual and things, but it's just the way I am. It's the way I was raised, and that's how I'm gonna be presenting today. We actually have an hour set aside, but it probably will only take me 30 minutes knowing myself. So today's goal, this is just to reiterate what the presentation is going to be about. It's just how to be more efficient. It doesn't really have to do with the new year. I just thought it'd be fun to play off resolutions. I don't know if anyone out there made a resolution to be more efficient, but good on you for that. This is a beginner's level webinar, as I mentioned before. Topics to be covered here will be things like pattern, symmetry, and using these different tools to make 2016 more efficient for you using Fusion 360. So I only have 10 slides in this case. It's going to be very heavily based in Fusion for this webinar. I think that's what most people are here to see. It's not to see a bunch of fancy slides. So real quick, where I'm going to be going is starting in sketching, obviously. That's kind of the building block for most features, most components, most bodies that you're going to be building. So I'm going to show you some of these options that you have here. So things like mirror, circular pattern, rectangular pattern. I don't know why I didn't circle mirror in this case, but things like that are all things that are going to help you get your design done as well, very fast, very efficiently. And also there's a symmetry restraint. I don't know if anyone here has used that before, but I started using it recently and I found it to be very helpful. Then we're going to look at how to stay efficient. This is going to be using features to reuse your cuts, to reuse your bodies, to go along patterns. That's one of the less common types of patterning that you'll see, and I have a good example of where you could use that and how to use that. And then also I want to show you how to leverage this sort of symmetry approach in your sculpt designs, because this is going to be very handy for you. It's going to help you get your designs done very quickly. So that's it. That's pretty much all the slides I have before the recap slides. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Fusion at this point and make sure I'm full screen. And we'll start with the sketching side of things, and I will try to check from time to time to make sure there's no questions or comments. So I'm going to go ahead and check right now. Okay, so not any questions that I necessarily need to approach right now. I'll come back and answer those ones at the end. Thanks for sending those in. You guys all know how to use the GoToWebinar interface, I hope. Good way to interact with me, send messages, etc. So in this case, I have 4 different sketches, and you'll see I use my timeline here to kind of roll it back to just focus on one at a time. But for the very first example, I wanted to show you how to mirror sketch entities. So this is a great way to leverage a complex sketch. And so this is not the most complex sketch, but it's got a lot of relationships in there. It's got a lot of it doesn't actually have any dimensions, but it could have a lot of dimensions. But once you get the general shape you're after, there's a lot of times where you actually want to mirror that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you how you do a mirror in the sketch approach. So I'm going to just use the drop down under sketch and find that first one here that I forgot to circle in my slide, but this mirror right here is going to enable you to mirror your sketched entities. And so I just want to show you how to go about doing these things. A lot of this is just showing you where to find these tools and how to use them in your design. So I'm going to go ahead and click mirror here, and you'll see it pops up this dialog here, and this is where I can go through and I can select my objects that I wish to mirror and my mirror line. So one thing that I would warn you about is that if you want to mirror every single one of these lines, you're not going to actually be able to unless you have like an additional construction line. I'm clicking right now. I don't know if you can hear that. I'll move my mic closer to my mouse there, but it's not enabling me to select a mirror line. That's because I have all these selected right now. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you want to use a mirror in this fashion, you need to either leverage your selection tools to only select the ones that you want to mirror without the one that you want to mirror about, but you can always go back and change your selection. So say I wanted to mirror using this line, so I'm going to just clear that selection from my object selection, come back to the second dialog here and just select that, and you'll see it's going to enable me to create that very quickly. So just a little thing to look out for, just an approach to how you do this. I'm going to clear that, and you can always go back and change these selections, right? I mean, that's the beauty of using this tool. So I might deselect that one, and I could reselect this one, and then go back and select this. And again, you can always add construction lines, and I've been leveraging keyboard shortcuts to turn lines into construction lines. So there's another shape that we could create from this. I mean, there's any number of ways that we can mirror this off and create a lot of different things, but just like that, we can very easily change what we're creating there. What I was mentioning is that there's a really easy way to change lines to construction geometry. If you select on it, you get the option from the sketch palette to do it, but you'll notice that as I scroll over it in my sketch palette, it's showing me that X there. That means that's the keyboard shortcut to do that. So I've been using this a lot. My coworker Bryce showed me this recently. So hit X, you'll see it converts that to that construction geometry. It's showing me that it's kind of a dashed line, and actually, because it's not a completely closed profile anymore, it's not actually showing me that shaded view anymore. So that might help you to convert lines into construction geometry a little bit easier and get through that a little bit faster. But just like that, I mean, that's your approach that you're going to use to do mirrored sketch entities. Now, here's the next example. In this case, this might be a flange or something. You want to put this whole pattern all the way around this. There's a couple different ways you could do it. You could actually do it as like a pattern of faces. Later on in the design, you could just extrude this out in the way that it's currently sketched, and then just reuse the face for this small cut that I want to actually pattern to make this flange. But in this case, I want to do it within the sketch. I mean, there are different times where you want to do one or the other. So in this case, I just want to do sketch, partially just to show you, obviously. But I'm going to go ahead and just double click on the sketch to activate it, and then I'll be able to get into my sketch options and do my circular pattern in this case. I don't know if you guys saw that. Actually, I'm going to back up and show you what I was seeing there as I was doing this. I mean, I'm looking at my sketch, but I'm not currently editing this sketch. I actually just showed it, basically. So when I went to use that drop down to jump into doing circular patterns, rectangular patterns, those options are grayed out. It's telling me I can't do that. And so, obviously I knew right away the problem is that I'm not editing the sketch. So it might not always be that obvious, but use the feedback that Fusion has, and I know that we're making steps to try to make it more and more intuitive every single day. I'm involved in a project where we're doing just that. So hopefully we see some of the benefits of that shortly, but to go back to editing that sketch to do what I originally intended to do, I'm just going to double click on the sketch once again to get into editing it, and using the drop down I can now select that circular pattern. In this case, I want to just pattern this one object that you see here, not every single sketched item in here. I want to do this flange pattern maybe, and so I'm going to select this item that you see here, and then you select a center point in this case. So obviously in this case, this guy's going to work well. And what's so great about this is just how easy it is to manipulate and kind of click and drag to increase or decrease the number of pattern entities that you have here. You can see I can just slide that and get quite a lot, or as few as I want. The other thing is that when you're doing this, and anytime you see these little toggles here, you can actually toggle entities on or off. So if I just wanted these three for whatever odd reason, I do have that ability to actually, make that very distinct change to this model. Now it was created with a circular pattern, and they are equally spaced in a sense, if there were this, I think it was 6 going around this, but I've actually cleared some of those selections off. So just some different options you have available to yourself. Let's go ahead and look at another case and using a different type of pattern, a different type of sketch pattern, and something that, this is probably the most commonly used type of pattern. So maybe I'll go and look at this from the top view to kind of focus in on this. But I have this block, and I want to put this cut all throughout this. And I'm not actually going through and actually creating the features. I mean, I think hopefully everyone here knows how to do that. You just get into creating different feature types. A lot of these are extrudes that I'm looking at right here. But in this case, I want to fill this face with this square cut. And it's kind of odd that it's in the center here. I mean, typically you might want to start with it in the corner, but this actually highlights something that I like about Fusion, and that's some of the flexibility you have in these tools. So again, I'm just going to double click that sketch from my timeline to activate it and get into editing it. And I'm going to use the drop down here, and I'm not going to speak to this one quite as much as I did the last one, but I'm just going to select the entities that I wish to pattern, rectangular pattern. And then there's this direction selection. So there's, it has a /S there. There's a couple different ways that we could do this. I mean, we could just select an edge here to orient, the first direction. So I'm going to select that and maybe drag it off a little bit. And you're going to see what it's doing there is it's putting however many number of these that I want across this with the spacing that you see here. And this is actually a pretty big sketch. Those are 40-inch spaced. I was just drawing these sketches, kind of not worried about scale too much, but just like that, we have that ability to go off in that one direction, to alter the spacing, to increase the number across that spacing. So that looks pretty good the way that we have it currently. I can go back up to these directions options that are right here. So I went back to this dialog here, and I selected within here. And if I wanted to go up and down as well to fill this face completely, I can select an additional edge to orient some other items. Now, when I first select that, you don't really get a preview, and that's because by default, when you select it, the distance spacing there is at 0. That's something that I, could probably change. But once you click this arrow and start dragging these off, you're going to start to see these populating this face. And I might want to do 4 or 5 of these across this, and I don't want to get too crazy with this because it could potentially bog me down a little bit, but there we go. That looks pretty good, and I'm just going to go to a willy-nilly distance. I'm not worried about this 36 2/3. It looks like that looks all right. Now, I was mentioning it, I want this to fill the entire face, so what do I do here? Well, make sure to check this property, this direction type. Right now it's in this one direction, but you also have a symmetric option. So if I select that, it's going to actually go symmetric in that direction. So this first one here is driving along the X direction, if you will. The second one is driving along the Y direction. Go ahead and change this once again, and just like that, we're starting to get a preview of what this looks like. Right now there's only 4, so it looks kind of funky, and it's not really truly symmetric. So let's add 5, and that's going to look pretty good. And as you're doing this, just get in and play with the options and scroll through different dimensions and try different things. And it's all just a design tool. I mean, you're not gonna find yourself in any pain if you make a little mistake. I mean, you can always just go back and undo and try different things. So that looks pretty good. Last thing here is the symmetry restraint. This is something that I just, again, recently learned about. Here I have a spline basically that I drew along this face, and I want these points to kind of align with one another. And so the easiest way to do that, one way to do that would be to just trim this right side and do a mirror after the fact, but there is actually sometimes benefit of keeping it one single line, right? So I do want this to be one single spline because it's going to help me split this body out later. That might be something that I want to do here. So in this case, I want to leverage the sketch palette and the symmetry restraint. So I'm going to double click on the sketch to activate it, and even though it wasn't activated, you were seeing me actually change that spline. That's kind of something that is pretty handy when you've designed something. I'll show you that once I create a feature from this. I'm actually going to do that in this case, but to do this symmetry restraint, I'm going to come down here, I'm going to select it, and pre-select it. That's just the workflow that we use in Fusion 360. I'm going to select the one end point, the other end point, and then the last input it's looking for here is the middle plane. So I have this construction line in here. I'm going to select that middle plane, and so these 2 points are symmetric about this line, and you can see there's symmetry dialogues showing that in the graphics area. So one more time, you don't have to go back and reselect it. This tool will stay on until you're done. You select 1, 2, and 3. And just like that, we've created this very symmetric kind of wave-looking pattern. I'm going to use my right-click, mouse marking menu to OK that, and then you can click and drag and do some pretty neat things with this. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and stop this sketch, and I'm going to go ahead and do a press pull real quick with just half of this. And as I was mentioning, that spline tool is still editable when you're not even editing the sketch. It's pretty handy. All I need to do to bring that back up to be able to use is I'm going to show that sketch, and then once I show it, you can see I can click and drag on these things, and my body will update immediately to show me that. So pretty neat, pretty nice to work with. I'm just clicking and dragging these around, and once I let go, it updates and shows me that new shape that I might be trying to accomplish there. So pretty cool stuff. I hope I showed you guys something new there. So let's jump into a slightly more complex design. In this case, I want to start to maybe make some patterns and do some features for this, a more realistic design. This pipe wrench that I've been using for a couple of different examples, simulation and such. But I might have a handle here, and there's benefits to just sketching out half, because it helps you to kind of get your head around the design and just half of the design. I mean, most cases your designs will have some sort of symmetry that you can leverage, so if you can leverage it, go ahead and try to do so. We'll do it for this handle to start, so I'm just going to use my press pull once again, that feature that I use all of the time. Just click to start dragging, and then I want it to orient to this face that you see here, the snap to face. I'm going to just click on it, and you'll see it's going to match up perfectly for me there. So that's not the efficient part of this. The efficient part is actually turning this and using it for the opposite side here. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that at this point. In this case, I'm going to use my mirror command. So I'm going to use my shortcut here, hit the S key on my keyboard. You're going to see I have a mirror command built in here. And now one thing you want to pay attention to is, how are you creating this mirror? What input is it looking for? What are you mirroring about? So first of all, what I want to check here is there's a couple different ways I could actually do this. I could do pattern face and actually select a couple different faces here, and I'm just going to do this real quick to show you this. And then I'll select that face, and you'll see it's actually previewing what it's going to look like once I finish this up. So that's one way to do it, but there's a more efficient way to do it that doesn't require 3 different inputs. So in this case, another option we have is pattern body. Pattern body is not really going to work well for me. I mean, I can select that, and I can use that edge there, but it's actually patterning, the top piece of this, and that's not the geometry that I'm trying to accomplish there. So something to pay attention to. The last one in here is pattern feature. In this case, I want to select that feature that I just created, that little push-pull that I did. And to do this, I'm going to just go down into my timeline here. You can see that press-pull, that extrude that I did. So I'm going to just clear that selection, come up here to my objects, first of all. And I'm going to select the feature there. That just requires one single selection. And then finally, I'm going to select my mirror plane. And just like that, we're able to create that with basically one selection versus 3. So just a little bit more way to be a little more efficient when you're actually using your pattern tools. So efficiency within efficiency. That's something I like to see. So the next one is, there's teeth that are missing from this one, right? So from the top face of this. So I have already sketched out kind of a tooth profile that I want to use here. Again, using press pull, the feature for all features, I'm going to just slide that down and go through all. And there we go. I have that first profile, but now I want to populate it again. So in this case, I mean, I could have done it within the sketch, but personally, I prefer to actually do the pattern from like a feature level. It's just a little bit easier for me. So I'm going to go ahead and find this. It's under my create option, and just scroll down, and you'll see it's in this pattern, subfolder, if you will, of this menu. So I'm going to select rectangular pattern. So this rectangular pattern, in this case, I'm going to again use that pattern feature, and you'll see there's actually a different pattern available here as well. Type this pattern component. I'll be using it a little bit later, but in this case, I want to pattern that feature. I could also do pattern face, but again, that'll take 2 selections. I'm looking for full efficiency in this case, so I'm going to select the feature from my timeline, and I'm going to select the direction from the graphics area. This is just going to be a line that goes in that direction, the direction that I want to do this in. So I could use any one of these lines that I'm scrolling over. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be connected to the body you're in, but it makes sense to try to, select something that's related to what you're doing. I'll select this one right here, and then I'll just click to drag, and you see right now it's only doing 3, so I'm going to just increase the number there. And again, this is one of these things where I don't really know how many of these I want to populate this, and I'm going to rotate this so we can visualize this a little bit better. It's kind of gray on gray there, so it's hard to see. So I'm going to just kind of drag this out and increase the number of teeth there until I get them to kind of really match together well, and 10's not quite doing it, 11 might do it. One thing that might happen there is if they're too close, there might be, removing material that I don't want to remove. But that one looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I might want to reverse the direction of those teeth, but the beauty of using these tools is that if I want to change that tooth, I want to change a dimension of that tooth, I can just edit the one single sketch that kind of built up all of these other components. So maybe I want to make it a little shallower. Maybe I'll go to like 30 degrees on this face, and make a change here. Make this like 90 or something. Let's just do 90. Now we have this real sharp tooth. Let's go ahead and stop this sketch. It's going to update the downstream features, and sometimes you'll get some funky things like this. That's something that you definitely want to address and clean up, and that's just related to these things kind of overlapping. If you go and look at this feature now that I've made this change, you'll see this overlapping that's occurring there. Something that might help deal with this is patterning type, and whether or not it's going to do some different things there. So you can do an identical type compute, you can do this adjust, you can do optimize. So there's some different options there to kind of get it done a little bit faster. If I change this to optimize, it's actually going to just clean that up for me automatically. So again, if you're unfamiliar with some of these options, just kind of start using them, see what they do, see if it gives you the results that you're after there. So that looks pretty good. I do have one more thing that I can do with this guy, and I'm a little bit behind schedule, so I said I was efficient, but I guess I'm not that efficient. But in this case, I might want to create like a grip on this cylindrical piece that I have here. Again, just using my press pull, I could either extrude this out or emboss it into it. So I'm going to just go down into it. Just like that, now I can go back to my pattern options and do a circular pattern for this guy. Again, I do prefer doing this feature style. It just helps me select it a little bit easier. The input for the circular pattern doesn't necessarily have to be like a true axis, like a construction axis, like going through here and creating an axis to do this. You can actually just select a cylindrical body. It's going to find the axis for that body, and it's going to start creating that for you. So don't necessarily pay attention to this axis dialog. It's it needs just something with an axis type feature within it, or it helps to find the location. So I'm going to increase the number here. I'm not going to get too crazy with it because I don't want to take a while to compute. But just like that, I can start to create the grip for that that piece that we have there. Now, this one I'm not really going to be showing how I did it completely, but this was a question that actually came in. I appreciate every comment we get from our users. It helps us understand what you're struggling with, and helps us devise our educational resources, webinars and stuff to suit what you're working on. But in this case, this customer wanted to actually create something that you see here, and they were wondering how you do that. I mean, without using patterns, something like this would be mind-boggling. It would be so hard to do, but I was able to do this. It looks like in 6 different features, and I mean the first 2 are really just revolving this thing around. I'm going to use my timeline here to show you what I did. So basically I created the revolve, and then I shelled it actually, so the first 3 features aren't really related to that. And then I created a sketch. Now this sketch that you see here is on, it looks like the front plane. If I just kind of reorient myself and look at my triad up here in the corner here. So that's helping me kind of visualize where that's at. And one thing you want to keep in mind is that the more normal you can get these cuts, the better the resulting cut will look, especially when you're working on like a curved surface like this. So I mean, I did this staggered pattern in one sketch, but if I really wanted to pay attention to this, and I really wanted to make sure that these cuts are normal too, I would actually go through and I'd create probably a second tangent plane for each one of these holes that I was doing. It all depends on what your intended geometry is and how you want it to look in the end of the day, but In this case, I did it with one single sketch. I did a cut from that sketch and just pulled it all the way through that front face. And then again, I just use a circular pattern to go all the way around. Once you get enough of these in this design, it's gonna fill up those faces. It's gonna create that cut. It's gonna look really nice. And while that's computing, there are quite a lot of those cuts that we're doing there. But while that's computing, I'll just go ahead and just double check to see if there's any issues with audio. No issues with audio, so that's good. And we'll go ahead and continue on. I do have, about 5 more examples to get through. Let's go and just close these out real quick. And let's look at this next 3. So now I'm going to get into, mirroring things like bodies and mirroring components and mirroring different things to help you create your designs much faster. So here we go. Number 4. This is a case where you might have this gripper arm and you want to mirror it over to the opposite side. And just to kind of get you to where we're at in this design, I mean, essentially all that was done was a sketch was made to create the base, the arms, some fillets were created to kind of round it off, some arms were created, and then finally the back face was created. So at this point, you want to actually mirror it over to the other side, make that opposite hand version. To do this, I'm going to use a mirror command, and not from a sketch standpoint, again, from like a feature body component standpoint. So again, I'm going to use that drop down under create. I'm going to find pattern, I'm going to find mirror, and then I'm going to select, what I want to mirror here. So in this case, I'm definitely looking to mirror bodies. I don't want to mirror features just because that's going to cause me more selections than this option that you have here. So in this case, I'm just going to select multiple bodies, because they're all going to be mirrored about the same plane, and that's just something that I thought about beforehand, and that's why I did this base plate the way that you see it here. Once I'm happy with that, I click that, and just like that, I can create that feature quite easily. Then you'd have to go and create your joints and do different things, but I'm going to just undo that and kind of roll this forward and show you this option. This is kind of what the end goal was in this case, and you can see there's this nice and joints here, and there's limiting factors to it to make sure they don't kind of interfere with one another. There's actually contact that's built into this as well, so that it bottoms out at some point. So pretty cool, pretty easy. You can't currently mirror your joints, so that's something that I think we're probably working on to make it a little bit easier. In this case, these joints were all created individually, so just something to consider, something to think about. So here's another case of where you could use a pattern. I have maybe a bolt and a washer that I want to put on this caster wheel that I've been working on. I could go and I could throw, all these different parts into this and kind of join it together, or I could build them and then, do as-built joints. But if I just do one of these, I should be able to reuse it for the other hole locations to make sure my bill of materials is, correct and everything's going to be made the right way. So in this case, the type of pattern that I'm going to use is one that you've already seen happen before. This is just going to be a rectangular pattern in this case. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to select maybe the object that I want to pattern. In this case, I could do either like a component or I could do body. And if I click body, it's going to enable me to select these guys. If I click component, it's going to let me select them as well. And I do actually want to mirror these as components. As I mentioned, this might be for bill of materials or something, so I'm going to make sure to use that component style pattern. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to define the direction. Now the first direction is pretty easy. I have this line right here that I can select from, and I can click that out and drag it, and in this case definitely the number is just going to be 2, and I can kind of eyeball it to get into the right location. I mean, if I was really designing this thing, I'd probably know the exact dimension that I'd want to use there, but 100 is not quite it. Let's just drag that up a little bit extra. It looks like 102. Odd dimension. Okay, so that's good and all, but how do I get it to go over this way? I really don't have line like an edge in here that I can select to define that second direction very easily. I mean, there are some, but if I'm looking at this from the current orientation I'm in right now, it's really not that easy. So one thing that you can leverage are these origin orienters. You know, your XY plane, your X-axis, your Z-axis, your Y-axis. So if I want to go through and select this, it's actually not enabling me to select it very easily. If you see, I'm scrolling over this axis that I want to use to make it go over to these two holes that you have here. All I need to do is I hold my command key on my keyboard so it knows that I'm trying to select that direction. Once I have that on, it's kind of like when you're adding additional fillets after you turn on the preview. This is going to enable you to add these additional directions. So here I'm holding Control or Command, depending on your operating system, and it's enabling me to select that secondary axis that I want to use to define this other orientation. So just like that, again, I can just click and drag. In this case, I do only want 2, and then I can get it into the right orientation. Again, I don't really know exactly what these dimensions should be. I'm going to just eyeball it for now and then get into location, and that looks about right. It's probably -84. So always pay attention to that negative or positive. You want to make sure that you get that oriented properly. But just like that, I was able to add, these additional 6 components to this, and now if I create the bill of materials, it's going to be accurate. I'm going to be able to get this done very quickly. Okay, let's see another component example here. In this case, I'm going to kind of breeze through this one. I think you guys have kind of beat this into your head pretty well by this point, but here I have a case where I have a tripod, and I want 3 of these to go around. Again, create, drop down, go to pattern. You can customize your toolbox that you see here to do that. If I want to reuse circular pattern, which is already actually added to this, hit your S key to bring up this toolbox. Start typing in, circular pattern, CIR. That's all you really need, and you can see it comes to the top of the list. If it's not already added to the toolbox, you can see that this little icon pops up next to it. If you scroll over it, it's giving you a tooltip. It's saying, hey, this adds it to your toolbox. Maybe I want to do circumscribe polygon, over and over again. I click this button. There we go. It adds to my shortcut. I can very easily get to that and start to use that. Anyway, let's go ahead and do our object circular pattern here. In this case, I'm going to do my component once again. Again, I can use my selection options to get to many different components at once. I can use the selection box. I can use the paint style selection. I can do the freeform selection. A lot of different things. And then all I need to do is select an axis to do this circular pattern about. And it looks like I missed one component there, so I'm going to select another component. In this case, I have a number of edges that I could use. I could use this one, I could use this one, I could use this face, I could use this edge. There's a lot of different things. So just select one, start to get the preview. If it's not a good edge to use, you can always go back and edit or change that. You just clear the option there. But here we go. That's good. That's all I really need to do there. Just like in the circular style command, you can increase or decrease the number here, using these little sliders, and you can see how complex and how many of these I can add very quickly. And just like before, you can actually clear toggle selections and get rid of those to do some interesting style patterns with skipping individual instances, something that you might need to do. So there we go. We've created this nice little tripod. Just took a couple of seconds there. Okay, so I have 2 more things that I need to show you here that I want to show you here. This path style. This is a case where creating reusing this design that I have currently worked on here, it might save me quite a lot of time. I have essentially here like a conveyor frame is what I'm calling it, but there's the support and the bolts and the nuts and everything that goes into the hardware of actually attaching this. And so essentially I want this style design over here, and I'm just going to highlight it for your visual purposes, to follow along this path. So, this is a shoe-in example of where you'd want to use a different style path that I haven't showed just yet. So using the drop-down under Create, I'm going to go and dig down to Pattern. This is where you'll find this Pattern on Path option. So there are some intricacies to this. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and It's going to have a very similar input as before, but as we get into it, you're going to get some additional options of how to control it and how to drive that path, and how you want the twist to happen along the path as well, because that's something that you need to consider in this case. So let's go ahead and just select the objects, and I'm going to just select, oh, I don't want to do faces, so don't do as I just did. Just change that real quick. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go clear the selection. I'm going to just select it once again, and I'm going to use my command select to select a number of these different items here. So we'll just get most all of these. You can always go back and edit if you miss a body, if you miss a washer or something. You can always go back and change that. So not too worried about that in this case, but all I've done there is I've selected my pattern components, which are the components that I've selected thus far, and then now I need to select the path. And so I'm going to get in here, and I don't need to go and find a sketch or create a sketch to do this path. I already have geometry that I want to use here. One thing that you might notice is that as you go to select this path, by default it doesn't want to follow that tangency. If you want to continue it along that path, you can hold control and select an additional entity there. And just like that, you can get the whole selection. So let me try that again. There we go. So again, one of these things that you might want to play with is, the visibility and what you're doing along that path. But just like that, you can see I've actually started to create these supports for this conveyor frame. I'm going to rotate around so you can see this a little bit better. But just like that, we've started to create it, but I'm having a little problem here. It's not really following that path, right? So it's not looking quite right there. So one thing that you want to pay special attention to when you're using this pattern on path option is the orientation, right? So right now it's just identical, so it just takes the initial components and just reuses that along the path with that same exact orientation. Works for the first one, works for the second one, not so much for the third one in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and change this from identical to path direction, and what that does is it follows that path. So now this path is actually driving the orientation for that third pattern component. So I can click and drag this and kind of get it to go along that path completely. I can increase the number that I have here. 3 is probably not good enough for along that path, but just like that, I've created a number of different components for this design. It looks great. I could do it again for the other leg there, but it's a little bit of overkill. You guys probably just need to see that once, and you get a pretty good idea of how to do that. So some good stuff there. Pattern on path, not something that you see every day. The last thing that I wanted to do was to show you how you can leverage symmetry and patterning and different things in the sculpt dialog. So not sure if anyone has seen this yet, but this is a part of a demonstration that we use to highlight some of the features and functionality of Fusion 360. It's part of this Ember demo, but it's this handle. So what I want to do is I essentially want to use this sketch that I have here to create this handle. So I'm going to do this, and I want to show you what happens if you forget to turn on symmetry, some of the options that you do have to use symmetry within this design dialog. And I'm going to close my data panel at this point. I don't really need it anymore. And then I'm going to just go ahead and create a form. I'm going to select to do this with a cylinder, and then I'm going to select that plane that I have there. That's a good plane to use in this case. And I'm going to rotate around to start the cylinder and just get it to look all right. So there's pretty close. I do want it to go about 50 millimeters this way, and this is where you can start considering how you'd actually design this and where you'd want to leverage symmetry. So this is actually a handle. So one thing we could do here is we could turn on symmetry here. Right now it's set to none, obviously. We could turn on different types of symmetry. So depending on the type of design that you're working on or the type of sculpted body that you're working on, you're going to see different options here. In this case, it's the cylinder, so I have this circular option that will enable me to leverage symmetry all the way around this body. I have also this other option, this mirror option, which will enable me to break it down into very specific regions. Like if I want the length to be symmetric, or if I want the width to be symmetric, or if I want the height to be symmetric, these are the different options I have. Height in this case is not really the best selection. All that's going to do is going to ensure that this right-hand side is equal to the left-hand side, so that's not necessarily what I'm after here. In this case, I'm going to clear that option, turn on the width one, and that probably makes the most sense. This is looking at the center of this handle. From left and right, from this orientation, you probably want that to look the same, so that looks pretty good. The other thing that I could do to leverage symmetry here is to use this drop down and turn on symmetric, and that's going to basically just go equidistant from that center plane that we sketched on, which is going to capture the geometry I'm after. But I want to show you what happens if you forget to do that. I mean, it's not a big deal. You can always go back and do some different things to capture that design intent that you're after. So just like that, we'll go ahead and create this, and I have that symmetry built in, and just to real quickly show you what it does for me in this case is if I select one side and drag it off, it's going to follow on the other side. So it just makes manipulation of these sculpted bodies that much easier. So let's go ahead and get to this shape that I'm after. So if I'm looking at this from the side here, it's a little bit too wide. Let's go ahead and kind of shrink that down a little bit and move it up. To start, maybe I want to shrink it in a little bit. This is a handle, so I want it kind of an oblong shape. But then the last thing is, if you look at the sketch that I have there, that canvas that I'm using to help drive this, is this line right here. I mean, if I want to capture this kind of curved shape that you see on left and right of this line there, it's like I'm not going to be able to do with what I have right now. So I mean, there's huge benefit when you're sculpting to keep things simple, because the less patches that you use to make up this geometry, the easier it's going to be to manipulate. So in this case, I do want to do something here to add a little bit of detail to this, and that's just to add some additional lines to use here. So and that's going to break these patches into some smaller patches. So I'm going to select this edge. I'm going to cancel out of my edit form. I did not save that change there. So real quickly, double click, it's going to select that whole thing. Just like that. Well, that's about where I was. Okay, so what I was getting at there, though, is that I want to reuse this edge, and I want to create some additional edges. So I'm going to select just a single edge and right-click. When I do that, it gives me this ability to do things like insert edges, to slide edges, to bevel edges, or unweld edges. And then I'm going to select insert edge. But one thing I want to do here is I want to show you what's going to happen. Although I only selected this one because I have symmetry turned on, it's going to insert another edge on this side, although it's not previewing it currently. One thing I want to do as well, though, is I want to go equidistant in both directions from that selection, so that's going to put two lines on either side of this. And just like that, I can click OK, and it's going to copy that edge, and it's basically created 4 new edges and a couple of new patches for me to use here. So this is going to enable me to do this edit form real quick, to select these two guys and kind of drag that up. And when you're in the sculpt environment, you're not really trying to get exactly to any exact shape. I mean, it's really kind of sculpting, trying different things, creating these really complex ergonomic shapes. So that's pretty close to the sketch that I have there. I'm going to click OK. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, as I mentioned, I mean, when I created this initially, I could have actually done the symmetry about that center plane, and I could have leveraged the symmetry or added or removed symmetry at any point. But at this point, I might have forgot. So I mean, I'm not lost here. What I'm getting at is that if I use this drop down under symmetry, I can do some mirroring here that'll help me. It's not this mirror identical. What that does is it turns on that green line basically that helps you ensure that existing patches are mirror images of one another. In this case, this mirror duplicate is going to enable me to duplicate an entire mirror body. So here I'm going to select this T-spline's body. You can see the selection is telling me that. The tooltip that's in the graphics area is telling me just that. So I'm going to select now the mirror plane in this case, and I'm going to just dig into my origin and find the plane that makes the most sense. I believe it's this YZ. Yep, that's it. So I'm going to select that. And as I did that, this sculpting environment is so smart. It actually, recognizes that had I not, rounded this off, that curvature continuous nature that we're always after with this design, or often not after with sculpting environment, wouldn't be there. So I'm going to undo that real quick, and I want to show that to you one more time. Right now it's got this really sharp edge, and if I mirrored it over like after I create a body from it, it's not going to look right. It's going to be this really sharp point, and that's not really what we're looking to achieve in this case. So again, as I select that mirror plane, it finds that additional face that it's attaching to, and it actually adds that roundedness to this to ensure that curvature continuous is always going to be present. So just like that, we can go ahead and click OK, and we're really happy with the way it looks. It actually adds symmetry to either side, and obviously when you do that in your duplicate, you do want that to some extent. But sometimes you want to actually remove symmetry, right? So using the drop down under symmetry, you'll see this ability to clear symmetry or to isolate symmetry, do different things. One thing that I should mention is that we've added this new freeze option, so you can freeze faces and keep them the way they are. Pretty darn neat. Try to use that where you can. It helps to ensure that faces that are, or patches that are a couple patches away don't get affected. So try to use that the next time you're using this tool. But here I want to clear the symmetry. That's what I was getting at when I got distracted there. But I'm going to go ahead and use this clear symmetry option, and all you need to do is select what you want to clear the symmetry from. I'm going to select the body there. Now when I go through and use this edit form option, I can go and I can make individual changes to this. So when I use that clear symmetry, I didn't really get an ability to clear just one portion of the symmetry. I mean, maybe I want the left-hand side to be slightly different than the right-hand side. So maybe I want to continue the symmetry down the length of this. So after you clear that symmetry, you can always re-add it. Again, just select two faces. That looks good. I'm using my my marking menu to get through that real quick, but now I can go through here and I can select a couple different faces here and use my edit form command, and I can make individual changes to this. I can drag things, I can do whatever I really need to do here, and it's still going to maintain the symmetry that I'm after, but avoid symmetry in other areas. So I hope you guys are using the sculpting tool. It's so fun. It's so easy. You can create some pretty complex stuff, and I use it all the time, even when I don't really need to. I mean, you can use sculpted bodies to do a lot of different design types. So I think that actually does it for the in-CAD stuff. I just want to jump back into my PowerPoint presentation real quick to kind of round out. Make sure to use our additional resources after you leave today. I mean, we've actually just kind of reworked our learning page, so there's some great new stuff on there for you to use. Check out our quick tips. We always have a quick tip. I think it's usually Tuesday every week, and it's a great way to learn something new. I mean, it might be something that you're struggling with. It might be something that'll save you from struggling in the future. So they're really quick. They're like minute, 2-minute tips to kind of help you in various design approaches. Check out our YouTube channel just in general. There's always stuff going up there. There's built-in tutorials. There's all this stuff. But at this point, I'm going to just mute myself and go and look for questions and answers to answer. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I hope everyone learned something new.